matatizo ya supply. Sasa hakuna petrol station yenye haina mafuta, number one. Number two, imesort out problem ya madola.
Well, tonight on the show, we take a look at what the year has been, some big conversations. The issue of the cost of living in the economy has been big. And tonight, as we end the year in style, we are joined by maybe some regular guest gangsters that you now know. And we start off with Bill Okero. Thank you so much for being here with us. And Wanjiru Gikonyo.
Pleasure.
Thank you. The rest of them are the usual suspects, whom you know very well. Look, what an interesting year I think it has been for the economy. And the reason we are starting with this issue of the G2G and the oil deal is because, you know, today is that day when we get the review of fuel prices. Some relief, it's gone down by 5 shillings in terms of petrol, and 4 for diesel, 4 for kerosene, 2 for diesel. But, you know, this was not particularly the promise of the G2G deal that featured so prominently this year. Sam, I'll begin with you and then we can go to the guests.
Right. Kenyans were expecting that there would be a reduction in fuel prices, and indeed there has been, but obviously not to the magnitude that you'd have expected, because a month ago, or actually 3 months ago, a decline in the international prices began, such that if you had to look at the prices in September versus now, they're totally different. But last month, I remember on November 14th, there were different explanations that the reason why the prices are not coming down as expected is because the stock that we buy from the from the petrol stations is stock that was procured 2 months before. But then again, even then, you realize that the stock that we should now be using in the month of December should have come, is it about October when the prices were really down?
Yeah.
But then the Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority has done a few things, a few calculations, which is quite interesting. I think it used to happen before, but has not happened for so long, for many months now. You find what they are calling the cross-subsidization. And that's what we're talking about on data point, to an extent that you find more than 5 shillings that you'll be paying for a litre of petrol is actually being used to pay for a litre of diesel. But then again, if you have to recall the conversations when they began in the month of March, the government-to-government deal, of course, it had been started by the current Energy Cabinet Secretary, Davis Chirchir, in the month of November last year. The conversations about how to secure stock of petroleum products for the country, going out to negotiate with different countries, and the very hurried procurement that happened in the month of March, to an extent that now we have the arrangement you have today. I recall the president and even the deputy president saying that part of the challenge that time was the US dollar, and with the arrangement that the government-to-government deal was now bringing is that there would not be a lot of competition for the dollar in the market, and therefore they are going to contain it. But if you have to look at even today, the statement from EPRA is talking about the exchange rate between the Kenya shilling and the dollar is 157 shillings. Of course, if you have to look at it versus what the commercial banks are giving, it is slightly different, but it hasn't helped. I remember in April, the dollar was exchanging at 132 shillings against the shilling. We're now talking about more than 157, actually 160 in some commercial banks.
Yeah.
So has it really served the purpose? Maybe it has in stabilizing stocks, I don't know. But in terms of sorting out the main target of containing the dollar versus the Kenya shilling, no.
Yeah. Bilo, perhaps you can weigh in on this one. I mean, the cost of fuel, obviously, cascades and affects just about the cost of everything. This was a big promise this year. Has it been fulfilled? Has it met the intended objectives, as we were told?
No, I've been very critical of this G2G, I think, even with some here many times. But there is no correlation between the prices of fuel in this country and the global price movement. And this is, you know, in spite of the argument of the government that every time they adjust the price, it's because of the global price movement. It's not. And I do remember a few weeks ago here, demonstrating that in the last 10 years, when you look at the movement, international oil prices, I mean, it's so minimal. It's coming to less than 4 or 5% globally in the last, 10. But in our case, we've moved all the way from by almost 100 and something percent. So it's not I think the reality is that the G2G deal, in my view, as I have said many times, fraudulent. It's a fraud. It had nothing to do with helping. It hasn't helped on the dollar. It hasn't helped on reducing the price of the fuel. In fact, the prices are higher because there are higher premiums being charged under that deal. Some of the things that I have seen is that the price of fuel in this country is high because the government wants to raise more taxes. Tax is a major component. The fact that there are up to 9 levies on a liter, 9 levies or taxes alone demonstrates clearly this is a way of making money. Petroleum is all about making money. So we would have thought that this time at least, if the international prices go down, they'll go commensurate down. It doesn't, because the government would really, even the 5, I'm sure it's coming because of the noise Kenyans have made. But government would not be keen to reduce the price of fuel because that's where they make most of their revenue.
Maybe just a quick follow-up question, Bilo, on the original objective was to protect or stabilize the shilling against the dollar, and we were supposedly going to import fuel at a lower price, or prices that wouldn't change much from between March and September, and that's not the case anymore. But questions, of course, are also being asked on what was the arrangement before government to government, and how did that work, whether it worked better than the government to government arrangement, when OMCs were free to actually bring in oil. Was it
through an open tender?
It was much more efficient. The open tender system managed by the Ministry of Energy was a very efficient system. What happens is the minister would aggregate the total demand for the coming month, for example, of fuel in the country, and place an open tender to all the marketers who would be willing to participate in the tender. And whoever, gives the lowest premium, per cubic meter on the import of the respective type of fuel, will then get the tender and go on. So what happens is that oil is a traded commodity. The mean average price is known at any one time. It's available on. So what the companies would quote on or compete on is the premium they would charge over and above the mean average that it's selling in Abu Dhabi and so forth. And so we were getting sometimes, I was in the industry, sometimes you would get a negative premium. A company, for example, that has interests in many countries and has a way of getting, fuel, and they would give, in fact, a negative. They would go below the mean average price in the market. But we were never at more than 10, 20 shilling, $20 per cubic meter. We have a situation where in the first 6 months, the government signed extra $100 per cubic meter premium. 118, in fact, for premium, and so forth. And the other day they said they have reviewed it and it's down still to 88 or 60 something. It's still high. So the premiums are pretty high because we are buying on credit from those guys. And those are businessmen. They know the prices of oil. So nobody's going to give you free, at no cost for 6 months on credit. So there is a premium to be paid additionally because of that. But in terms of the dollar, I must say there hasn't been, because the way it works is that when the oil comes in to Galana and the 3 appointed companies, they have to sell in shillings to the local marketers. The local marketers' money now received in shillings will have to be put in an escrow account in KCB or one of the banks. And that bank has been asked to buy dollars from the market. So that when the time for payment is due, you must have enough dollars to pay. So in terms of being present in the market, the bank is in the market and they're buying dollars. They have to from that account. So there's no way you can tell Kenyans, we're saving on the dollars or we've reduced the slide of the dollar. You can't. I mean, they have to buy the dollars and that is the...
And just how accurate is this term, government to government?
Very inaccurate, because there's no government involved. You're buying from companies like ADNOC and Aramco, and the off-takers here are private companies also. There's no, government to government. I do remember during Kibaki's one time they got a government-to-government deal from Nigeria and another one, I think, somewhere from Latin America. But government to government is when you sue the government and you get into a deal. That this government, for some reasons, will give you, your country, this product at this price, a better deal than what you would have got in the market. But here we are getting the product directly from the mean average price on that day, plus a premium. There's no government-to-government deal. There's no special deal you're getting. So that's why I don't believe the government to government itself, in real sense, is accurate. It's not.
Yeah, and so this is the year when we've seen the G2G deal, but if we're to sum up what that has been like for the economy, this has been the year of the Finance Act, which did quite a few things. I mean, it almost seems like it's, many, many months ago, but in that Finance Act, we had the housing levy, we had the double VAT on fuel. It's really been, one thing after the other, and now we've heard of the implementation of the Social Health Insurance Fund, which will be 2.97% of gross salary, uncapped, that will take effect 2 or 3 months from now. But what for you has been, the economy and how that has been managed over the last year by this administration?
Right.
Yes, you, Wanjiru, sorry.
I
was looking in the general direction,
obviously this administration came in fully aware that they needed to raise revenue to deal with debt crisis. They talked about a hole that they were going to stop digging. They talked about reducing tax, not increasing it. And quickly reneged on that undertaking. With regard to the impact of the taxes they've already levied under the previous Finance Act, we are reading in the paper, today's paper, I think, or yesterday's paper, showing that the amount of fuel being sold is going down. Because people can't afford to run their cars. And so really, we're looking at a situation where government is doing two things. One, they're restructuring how they run government.
Correct.
And they're coming up, this G2G sounds like government was serving as a broker between private entities. And, then you wonder, what's the legal protection? Because this is public money, after all. When you go through a formal procurement act, there's accountability, and you know where the buck stops. But when government becomes a broker, putting businesses together, then which is the operational act? Because in the corporate sector, the accountability is not as keen as it is in the public sector. That's why you want, public money to be procured under the Public Act. There is a gap in terms of accountability of the private sector. So when government gets out of the public sector and gets into private, we are getting into very tricky area. There's just this idea that the private sector is very benign, that they're more efficient, but really a lot of corruption happens in the private sector. So government is pushing us into an area we don't quite understand, and then they're making, it's like a double taxation, because they're going to make employers and salaried workers, pay for this. And at the same time, then there's all these other heavy taxes. So the sum of this is we have a government that has an expenditure problem, that promised to deal with that expenditure problem, but we saw that after making a lot of quite a lot of noise about reducing the deficit, they then had to run a supplementary budget where in essence they're saying, well, let's increase our expenditure. And then they keep drawing on the public kitty, on the public's pocket. So our real question is one to interrogate this. We want health insurance. We would like the housing levy. The court has spoken on that. And of course, we talked about the courts and the court ruling and the president's reaction on the court ruling. So we have a government that's intent on implementing its development priorities. It seems to be outside of the public procurement and process, and at the cost of Kenyans. So we've got a double problem, and maybe the third problem is the lack of accountability, which comes with the kind of appointments that were made, which you were speaking to earlier. So we are in very, very, it's difficult times. Because it's heavy on the on households, it's heavy on the pocket, but then also there's the accountability question and where are our checks? So no, this is very, very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But Wanjiru,
Putting it politely.
as you speak about accountability, there's also the question of accountability to promises that politicians make to the people. And the president has been speaking and saying that this housing program was in the manifesto of Kenya Kwanza, it was in the manifesto of Azimio. And actually yesterday he was saying that it has to be implemented this time round, whatever it takes, at whatever cost. How does the Republic or Kenyans, the nation, how do they hold their leaders to account? But also, what is the president supposed to do after making such a promise, implementing with all these hurdles?
Right. He made many promises, and at the end of the day, you prioritize because there were promises around the cost of living. You know, the very attractive slogan, if you're in a hole, stop digging. Has this government... Yes. PIA, the Hustler Fund. So there were lots of promises made. The issue is, of course, you have to prioritize. There have been questions raised around the housing levy. They've tried to resolve some of those. But there are also, you know, some statistics being thrown around, the employment creation that's going to come around this. And, you know, this isn't supported. What should the president have done? What did Kibaki do when he had an election promise around free education that had never been seen, that was going to cost the taxpayer? Came into government, put it to Kipra, and said, crunch the numbers for us and show us how we do this. You don't ram down people's throats. Pende msipende, we are doing a housing levy. Because what if the numbers don't add up? Then you look for different ways to do it. So government, again, is getting into spaces it doesn't belong. And then its priorities are questionable. There's also been a story running in the papers this week about a shortage of TB medicine. There's also the issue about non-remittances, the COB, who, of course, is now under the radar of this administration, from parties we don't know, who would dare, you know, manhandle a state officer of an independent constitution. That's a very scary thing. Has also talked about pending bills, some of which are state-owned enterprises that are not remitting statutory dues. Government is in a crunch. So are you saying the housing levy will sort the crunch? And, you know, basically there's the legal issue, there's also the economic issue. And it sounds like, despite the talent, because I must say the president has very good advisors, you know, very illustrious people, very good CVs, but he doesn't seem to be taking their advice. So we have a problem here in terms of government, you know, where we really are. We've had the Treasury, we've had the CBK talking about our economic realities. The president's not the chief economist. He should let the economists tell us the direction to go.
Yeah, and even that, Bilo, even, you know, as you come in, it almost also seems like government itself is speaking at cross purposes when it comes to the economy. So who do we believe? Should we believe that they know what's going on when, for instance, the president, you know, a few weeks ago said December would be a good month and we would start to see, you know, some relief. I understand a few days ago he now said we shall see that in January. But within the same span of time, we had the CS for Treasury going before Parliament and painting a rather grimmer picture than his boss. Then we have, you know, advisors online who are saying all manner of things. So what's happening with the economy? And to whom do we go to get clearer understanding of this is where we are, this is the problem, and these are the solutions?
We also have the deputy president playing it safe by expanding the time frame, saying you can do this in 10 years.
Right,
No, I think... Generally, obviously the buck stops with the president in terms of what happens. But it's time the president, he has to smell the coffee. He must find the ground is shifting. Things are not... Look at the opinion poll today in the papers, that 84% of Kenyans are saying the economic situation is worse than it was 12 months ago. His deputy has said that, you know, we took over something in ICU. The president has moved it to HDU. It is now going to general ward and which will be out soon. But I think it was the opposite. They took over something, General Ward, and we're almost ending up in ICU. Because what is an indicator of a good economy? It's not about, I've pushed inflation down from 9 to 6.8. Yeah. No, it's about people having jobs, higher incomes, businesses are booming, cost of living is lower. This is is the well-being of the country. It will reflect a good economy. This is why Kenyans are telling you. So the reality of the situation, you read the pulse of Kenyans, and they do it through opinion poll. They've just said it today. It's headline that Kenyans are saying we are worse than where we were a year ago. So it doesn't make sense when the head of state goes on a national holiday like Jamhuri Day and says, the economy is now stable. And
what would a stable economy look like, and how would it feel, for us?
You would feel, for example, that businesses are growing. Jobs are being created by businesses. More and more people are getting employment. Not 70,000 people losing jobs. People are getting more jobs. Incomes are getting higher. The cost of living is cheaper. Your shilling will buy you more goods than whatever. Your currency would be stronger. It would not be on a free fall. Interest rates, would be stable. You would not be, you took over a country where treasury bills were 8%, and you are now paying nearly 20% as a government. Yeah. You can imagine what the Kenyans would pay. Right. So, clearly, there's no indication. Anybody can see that the situation is not good. So, I think, reading from different scripts, unfortunately, this is the way this government seems to be working, where everybody is giving a statement. And the statements are contradictory. This is the third time on Jamhuri Day that the president said the economy is now stable. We have stabilized it. What has been stabilized, you don't understand, because everyone is saying, look, the revenues are falling. We are not paying salaries on time. Offices, if you go to government ministries, they can't even afford to buy photocopy paper. Serious problems. Development projects have stopped. You're having difficulty servicing your loans. You have a lot of challenges. So I think if you are looking at the economy in the context of paying a Eurobond loan or being able to, get some taxes in place, I don't think that is really what the economy has stakeholders. And the largest stakeholder in an economy is the people, is the businesses, is the farmers, it's the employees, it's the employers. You must listen to everyone. This is a government that doesn't listen to anyone. There's no time this government has called stakeholders for a meeting to discuss the economy of this country. You don't sit with industrialists. You don't sit with farmers. You give directives. It's top down. And then if it doesn't work, you go for another one. This is not the way to run a government. I think when you are in a hall, you need to listen to people. But
Bilo, in all fairness, there have been some forums. I think I was in one at the Serena one time where the president turned up for KEPSA. KEPSA and KAM, Kenya Association of Manufacturers forum. And the advice was not coming out the way it should out here. There was a lot of praise, short of KEPSA and KAM staging a dance. Isn't that where the problem is?
So no. You see, like that meeting, I'll tell you that, because I'm a member of KAM. Before the meeting, documents have been done by technocrats, by the experts on both sides, the government experts, the ministry and the technocrats, plus the experts in KAM, and presented to them. So that these are the people who should now be briefing their bosses, and these are the things that should be discussed. But what happens is those things don't come to the table. Instead, it's the government, and so those guys will be left to talk. And they have experience. They have gone to meetings where they try to discuss the technical issues, and people have been thrown out of meetings by the CS and others. So I think, in those meetings in the state houses with the presidents or hotels, that's not where you can resolve things. I think they need to, you need a deep dive to discuss. The experts are the ones who can discuss to understand each sector, how it's performing, and look, 12 months, 1 year down the road, what should be done? What are the challenges? Why is your sector not growing? Why are we losing 7,000 jobs in this sector? Why is this happening? That's not happening. What can we do to improve your... People have challenges. Government can help. Yeah. They can't address all challenges, but they can help.
But
by listening.
And maybe this for both of you can weigh in on this issue of the quality of the team, because you referred earlier to the opinion poll that went out yesterday. And you had top performers and the worst performers. And guess what? In a country that has a struggling economy, the CS finance was not doing well. It was among the bottom 5. So, and I hear you when you say the president, but also there's always been, when you look at
The team.
The team. Shouldn't there be a go-to person also on the economy? And what is the quality of the team at Treasury, and what is the quality of generally the team? Is it a team that is giving valuable advice to the president? Because you remember he very publicly lamented that he knew some of those roles better than the people that he had appointed.
You know, if you are a CS today in this government, you have to walk a very thin line. You have to be very careful. Because when the buck ideally stops with the CS Treasury, that's what the law says. That's what the Constitution says. This is the person with the power regarding matters economy. But when you have an entire team of economic advisors, the whole ministry at Treasury, at State House, literally, running the show, telling you what you need to do, what you don't need to do. They're the ones who determine policy, in fact. So you are left, just scratching your heads and simply. That's why you find the CS Treasury behaving like a lame duck. You know, he appears there and he says, you know, guys, I can't even pay salaries. And you don't expect those kind of things from someone who is in charge of his. So I think the way the things are structured is, by the way, is not only in Treasury. I'm seeing quite a number of ministries complaining. Decisions are being made, policies are being made, and they're simply being asked to do this. And in the ideal situation in government is decisions need to come up bottom up from the technocrats in the ministry. Then comes to cabinet. Then, a policy decision is made. But where it's bottom down, policies come up from there. You're told, do this. That's why even under Uhuru, you found hundreds of decisions or directives made by president don't get implemented. And this is likely to happen to this administration. Already you've seen the courts trying to throw out many of these things. You've seen sectors of health complaining, players in health complaining that there was no adequate time to look at this SHIF thing. They were not consulted. So I think the best thing is not having the entire government at State House. No. Let ministries do the work. They have experienced people. They know what is required. They come up with policies to you. Then up there, those guys can look at it and say, fine, this works, this doesn't work.
I think those watching us would expect us to give us some evidence. Where is that interference? You're saying they have to walk a thin rope. Is there proof of interference from State House in ministries?
It was in the papers just a week ago. It was a big story that CSs and ministers are worried because they can't do their job and they're being told do this and appoint so and so and do that. And it was carried, a story that was publicly carried in all your medias.
Wanjiru, where do you take the personality of a leader? Because the president has been described as a person who has clarity of thought, vision, very astute and very eloquent, not just in the country but even beyond. Where do you take that in the face of all the challenges that we face and an assumed culture in the public service that people don't want to do things, people are resistant to change?
Right. And I think you're asking the right question because it is a leadership question. One, we're a presidential system. Yes. So the direction of the country is driven by the president's party. Now, the leadership style of William Ruto is that he is the driving force behind the party. When Linus asked for evidence, I'm wondering which report is this that you want us to produce? There's the evidence of, just kind of reading between the lines. So he's the driving force. Now, the question was asked, politically, William Ruto is very astute. When it comes to running government, to governing, what style would he bring? And we've seen the style. The style is he likes to work with people who are pliant. So the appointments are made on the basis of people maybe who owe something, who aren't that independent. So we are seeing independence isn't rewarded. And in fact, when people are too independent, you'll get picked up in the middle of the night and get driven to Mombasa. If you don't listen to that summons, a phone call, wherever the phone call comes from, to do what you're asked to do. So the big, actually the tragedy is we seem to be moving back into the Moi era because that's when we had the era of phone calls. We thought we were done with that. The Kibaki administration had this public sector transformation program that they ran, trying to kind of revitalize the public sector, which had really been, really run down. And we then passed a constitution trying to insulate institutions from this political interference. So the values of the public service are independence of the public service. But we're not seeing that. We are seeing abject interference through appointments. We are seeing behind the door kind of, directives. And really, I laud the magistrate who you mentioned, who was handling this Aror case, because that is evidence. When you have a prosecutor-led acquittal, and instructions are given, and in fact, everyone in that case has admitted what's happening. Yeah. So it seems we are crossing a line as a country, in that not only do we have an economic crisis, and we then have the solutions that had been promised aren't happening. You have, the technocrats saying one thing and the political actors saying something else. But we are also having independent institutions being harassed and muzzled, and threats of removing people and prosecution starting. So we are really moving back into, we said we are fearing dictatorship, and we are very free to speak. We are very free, but what we are seeing is rule of law is, almost being buried through these actions. So when the character of a leader is very important, and in a presidential system more so, because the only check on a presidential system is parliament, and the first action of this administration was to buy parliament. And so when William Ruto talked to us about rules-based was it rules-based government or rules-based society, we forgot to ask which rules, because we assumed it would be the rule of law, and it's not the rule of law. These rules are there are many gangsters, not just us, and some, managing our public money. So those are the rules.
Yeah,
yes.
But Wanjiru, I just want to test your fears, because could they be exaggerated? Because I know some politicians have been talking as if they just won the 1988 election. But there is a document in here, the Constitution of Kenya 2010, that has not even allowed this team to have the so-called Chief Administrative Secretary, CASS. So it's not easy to go to the past, is it?
It's not easy, but you can hammer away. I mean, and it's a good point you make. We need courage, and I think during the opening statement you said that, because we need courage by individuals to stand for the Constitution, because this government is very intent on having their way despite the Constitution. And when I say going back to the Moi days, it is, this thing of phone calls was something we had in Moi days. That had disappeared. Now we are hearing phone calls. We are seeing cases of
calling?
That. I don't know who calls. I haven't received one yet. Yeah, then you see, again, some very blatant issues. For instance, there was this case that came out, I think maybe it's 2 months ago, around the edible oils. Because you're talking, one of the big pillars of this administration was also restructuring these structural problems that are frustrating the economy. And we've seen that, the fighting of cartels. And in fact, earlier I was asking Bilo, so are we really winning or are we replacing cartels with new cartels? We don't know. Then there's this scandal of the KNTC. And then you look at the individuals involved. And you'll say this is very blatant kind of theft. Somebody's given a public appointment in a very key institution. And then those companies aligned to that person are then benefiting from. So the issue, and it came out during this national dialogue process, it's all around elections and who finances elections and what happens immediately an administration comes into government in terms of paying back. And until we do this campaign financing conversation, we are actually, yes, we've moved from the dynasty, but now we've moved into some...
Another dynasty.
Another dynasty, number 2. Kleptocracy, you know, we need a name for it. But all we've done is, what is it? Different forest, same monkeys. Yeah.
You know, we've gone into the issue of governance, which is what I want us to come back to in a moment. Sam?
Right. Carol, I wanted to hear from you because everyone is wondering about the solutions. I remember on the 14th of February this year, a very important day, and for the love of the country, the president was praying for the rain, but also spoke about that we are now, the international financial system is now opening to us. We're accessing more than we need. Barely 2 months later, the government was facing challenges paying salaries. Then all of a sudden, just before the end of the financial year, the counties received all their resources. In July, August, the resources are not there. As you speak, just a few weeks ago, the Council of Governors was saying that they have not received some 62 billion shillings. The Cabinet Secretary is explaining that, of the National Treasury, that they actually have a liquidity challenge. Yet the President and the government is getting support from the IMF, from the World Bank. We have burst our public debt ceiling, or is it the anchor now, 10.58 trillion shillings by September. Can there be a solution out of all this? If we're busting all the thresholds that we've put for ourselves, and you're accessing resources but still have challenges in the country, where does our help come from?
I think the challenge we have in this country is what you have said is governance. Look at this issue you've just raised. This is how the government works. A budget is prepared. So for all the needs that they want or they have the money to finance, they'll prepare a budget. That budget is followed by an appropriation law that authorizes Treasury to appropriate a certain amount of money which has been voted for in the budget for this activity. So debt is budgeted for. The repayments of debt and all that is budgeted for. County government, everything is budgeted for. Then 2 months later, you come and say, there's no money. Clearly what has happened is that the money that has been budgeted for has not been spent in the manner that has been appropriated. There is mismanagement. And this is where the role of the control of budget comes in, that I've mentioned a couple of times in other forums. There's no money that can be withdrawn from the consolidated fund without the authority of the control of budget. And when doing so, the controller must look at the appropriations law. Clearly, has this been appropriated for this purpose? Yes. Okay, the money is released. So when you find then there's no money, but the budget is clear that there's money, and this budget is based on revenues projections. And where the projections are not adequate is based on borrowing that they will do to cover that. So that this is a budget that is fully covered. That's the one that is approved. There's no way a budget can be approved it's not fully covered. So where there is a shortfall in the revenues, which happens frequently, for example, last year they estimated to collect 2.5 trillion, they only got 2 trillion. What they do is then they get this support. That's why IMF and these guys are there to give them budgetary support and so forth when they want to borrow. So then ideally you would expect, if people are going by the book, by the law, all those activities will be financed as required and on the times that are required. But what happens is that one day is misplaced priorities. Money gets diverted. Something that is not in a budget suddenly becomes financed and there's money available for it, which happens, irregular expenditures. This is why you find a lot of this, in particular in the last couple of years, what they are calling supplementary budgets. The money required only once. Now you see supplementary budgets coming 2 or 3 times in a year.
And this time it came pretty early.
Yes.
I mean, what was that?
It's
2
all
months
about,
after,
yes, 2 months
after the
immediately
budget?
after.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
So you are trying to regularize some irregularity that has been done. That's what because they can't do it within the law. They come on to Parliament and say, you guys, you know what, we had to do something else. So the money is being reallocated from wherever it was voted for to this other activity. It has already been spent. So it is this kind of misappropriations or mismanagement of reallocating money that is sometimes based on political expediency and patronage and other things which determine the priorities. That is where the problem is in this country. Otherwise, you can't explain why money that has been voted for. I am a ministry. My money has been voted for. I have it in the budget. but I don't get anything throughout the year. I only get my salary and my rent, and the rest we are told, no exchequer, hakuna pesa. And it's voted for and appropriated and approved.
I don't know, Bilo, whether it would come as some form of consolation that every wrong step you take as government cannot deliver the right results. And this government has tested it for a while now. You look at, Wanjiru, you mentioned earlier the issue of the Kenya National Trading Corporation and the silent government-to-government thing there as well, where government actually gets into appointing companies that will then import. We end up with wrong oil that is rotting somewhere. KEMSA, there was an attempt to do some shortcuts of procurement. It failed. So is it some consolation also that with the times, you can only do the right, you can only follow the right path, otherwise you will fail? And do you think this is something that the government at some point will reflect and say, hey, can we follow the procedure? Maybe we can get better results?
No, governments by nature make silly mistakes all over the world. That's why you have institutions of checks and balances. This is why in our constitution we have so many independent institutions and offices, that have been put there to provide the checks and balances. Because of that factor, that government, if you leave the executive to do what they want, they will do silly things. But when those institutions are not working, when that independence is eroded for one reason or the other, or the officer who has been appointed to do that independent, are
they totally incapable of saying, stop, this is silly?
They are not, but you see, it's there's a tradition in the country. You get appointed, somehow the executive is part of the appointing authority, and so society also looks forward to one of their own being in government. This thing is owed to society, it's owed to the community, it's owed to the executive. So you don't want to rock the boat in a sense. There are not very many who would want to play that, gangster role. They want to be compliant. But I think, so the checks and balances are the ones that are there. For example, Parliament, she mentioned, is a key institution. Not a shilling can be appropriated without the authority of Parliament.
Right.
And the Public Finance Management Act, let me tell you, has dozens of penalties, by the way, provided over 36 different offenses. The CS, the Permanent Secretary in Treasury, is the accounting officer.
Yeah.
They appoint every accounting officer of the ministries. If you misappropriate or overspend, they can withdraw your appointment as accounting officer. And there are so many offenses for which penalties are provided. Not a single day in the last 10 years since the PFM was put up from 2010, 20 years now, no one has been convicted because of being in breach of the Public Finance Management Act by the Treasury, or thrown out by the Treasury.
Yeah, look, we're getting into the issue of governance, which is exactly where, this conversation then goes. And taking a look at performance, communication around, how the government is communicating, its agenda, its development plan, and indeed, the area of corruption, which might not have been something seemingly at the top of the mind of this administration, but it has suffered, a few whiffs here and there. So let's take a break. When we come back, we will talk about that and more here on Newsgang, the very last edition for 2023. We'll be right back.